From the moment I took my first breath, I was wrapped in expectations, wrapped so tightly I almost forgot who I was underneath. My parents called me their perfect daughter, and for years, I wore that title like armor. I thought being perfect meant love, meant belonging, meant safety. But as I soon learned, perfection can be a prison. Growing up in a small suburban town, my life seemed ordinary from the outside. We had a cozy house, a dog named Max, and family dinners every night. I was the good student, the respectful daughter, the one who never caused trouble. I wanted my parents to be proud. I wanted to live up to the image they had of me: smart, kind, responsible. School was where I shone. I pushed myself harder than anyone else in my class, not just for me, but to prove to my parents that all their sacrifices were worth it. I was in honors classes, part of the student council, and had a future full of promise. But underneath the smiles and the straight A's, a small voice inside me whispered questions I was too scared to answer. Who am I really? Is this who I want to be? At home, things seemed calm on the surface. My mom was warm and caring, always reminding me to eat properly and take care of myself. My dad was quiet but supportive, never missing one of my soccer games. But every now and then, I'd catch them exchanging looks, the kind that said more than words ever could. There was a tension I didn't understand, a weight I felt pressing down in the air. One evening when I was 15, after finishing my homework, I heard my parents talking in the living room. Their voices were low, hushed, but filled with worry. I wasn't supposed to listen, but the words drew me closer. Not yet, my mom said softly. She's too young to understand. I know, my dad replied. But we can't keep this from her forever. I froze. What could they possibly be hiding? I retreated to my room, but sleep didn't come. My mind raced with confusion and fear. The perfect world I knew felt suddenly fragile, as if it might shatter at any moment. A few days later, my parents sat me down in the living room. Their faces were serious, a mix of fear and love in their eyes. I have something important to tell you, my mom began. My heart pounded. Was I in trouble? It's about your father, my dad said quietly. I looked at him, confused. He was right there, wasn't he? What else could they mean? It's not the man you think he is, my mom said, tears welling in her eyes. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, they told me the truth, a truth so shocking it felt like the ground had been pulled from beneath my feet. The man I had always called Dad wasn't my biological father. My real father was someone else entirely. Someone they had kept away from me for years. They said they did it to protect me from a past they thought was better left buried. They wanted to spare me the pain, the confusion, the broken pieces of a story that wasn't perfect. I sat there, stunned. The life I had known, the rules, the expectations, the love, suddenly felt like a lie. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away. But all I could do was sit there and let the words sink in. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my parents' faces, their fear, their guilt, their hope that I would understand someday. I felt torn. Part of me wanted to forgive them immediately, to hold on to the family I knew. But another part of me was angry that they hadn't trusted me with the truth sooner, angry that my entire identity had been built on a secret. The days that followed were a blur. I went to school but felt disconnected. Friends asked what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. How do you explain that the people who raised you hid the biggest secret of your life? At home, things were awkward. My parents tried to act normal, but I could see the strain in their eyes. They were scared of losing me, scared of what this secret might do to our family. One afternoon, I confronted my mom. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice shaking. She sighed, sitting beside me on the couch. Because I wanted to protect you. Your father and I made mistakes, but we did everything we could to give you a good life. But I'm not who I thought I was, I said, tears threatening to spill. Everything's a lie. She took my hand. You are who you choose to be, not what your blood says. Her words comforted me, but didn't erase the doubt. I began to look at everything differently: my childhood photos, family stories, even the way my parents acted. I realized they weren't perfect. They were flawed, scared, and human. But what hurt the most was wondering about the man I'd never met. Who was he? Did he want to know me? Did he even know I existed? Those questions consumed me. I started searching, quietly, at first, online, through social media, old records. I wanted to find him, to hear his side of the story, to understand where I came from. One night, I found a man whose face looked strangely familiar. I hesitated, then sent a message. Simple, honest. Hi, I'm your daughter. The silence afterward was unbearable. Days passed with no reply. Each ring of my phone made my heart race, hoping it was him. When he finally responded, his words cut deeper than any pain I had felt. I don't know who you are. Please don't contact me. The rejection was crushing. I felt invisible, unwanted, and more alone than ever. But through all the heartbreak, something inside me grew stronger. I realized that family wasn't about perfection or secrets. It was about love, messy, complicated, and real. And that love wasn't just from the people who raised me, but from the courage to face the truth, to find my own identity, and to keep moving forward, no matter how broken the path. The perfect daughter was gone. In her place was someone learning to be real, flawed, brave, and searching for her own story. After the storm of revelation hit me, life didn't return to normal. It never would. Instead, everything changed, quietly, slowly, like cracks forming beneath a once solid floor. The house I'd always called home began to feel unfamiliar, as if every corner held a secret I hadn't yet uncovered. The smiles felt forced, the silences too long. I tried to act normal at school, but every interaction seemed tinted with a shade of uncertainty. Friends who once laughed with me now looked at me with curiosity or pity, sensing something was different. I was a puzzle missing pieces, and nobody knew how to put me back together. At home, things grew more complicated. My parents, the people I thought knew me best, now seemed like strangers carrying invisible burdens. There was tension in the air that no one talked about. I'd catch my mom staring out the window, lost in thought, or my dad retreating into silence after work. One afternoon, while helping with dishes, I asked the question that had been eating away at me since the secret came out. Mom, why didn't you tell me earlier? She paused, water running over her hands, then looked at me with tired eyes. We thought we were protecting you, she said softly. Your childhood, your innocence. We wanted to keep it safe. But I'm not a child anymore, I said, voice breaking. I needed the truth, even if it was hard. Her shoulders slumped as if she carried the weight of the whole world. I know. And I'm sorry. That word, sorry, didn't fix everything. It wasn't enough to erase the years of silence, the secrets that had shaped my life without my knowing. But it was a start. Over the next weeks, the walls between us started to crack. I saw my parents differently, not just as mom and dad, but as people with their own fears and regrets. I learned about their struggles, about the mistakes they made, and the love they had tried so hard to protect. At the same time, I struggled to understand my own feelings. I was angry at them for lying, at the world for being so unfair, and at myself for feeling lost. But I was also scared, scared that this secret might change who I was, who I could become. One night, I found myself in my room, scrolling through old family photos on my phone. There were pictures of birthdays, holidays, and everyday moments, smiles frozen in time. But now, each photo felt like a reminder of a life I wasn't fully part of. A life built on lies. That's when the phone rang. It was my best friend, Emma. Hey, I haven't heard from you, she said, concern clear in her voice. I wanted to tell her everything, about the secret, the confusion, the pain. But the words caught in my throat. I'm okay, I said, forcing a smile I knew she couldn't see. Emma didn't push, but I knew she was there for me, no matter what. And that was a lifeline I clung to. Days turned into weeks. and the secret became a shadow that followed me everywhere. I kept trying to balance school, family, and my own emotions, but it felt impossible. The weight of the truth was heavier than I ever imagined. Then came the hardest moment, facing my classmates. Rumors spread quickly. Whispers in the hallways. Questions I wasn't ready to answer. I became the girl with the family secret, the one who wasn't quite like everyone else. It hurt, deeply. But in that pain, I found something unexpected, strength. I realized I wasn't alone. Others had their own stories, their own battles behind closed doors. And maybe, just maybe, my truth could help someone else feel less alone too. I started writing in a journal, pouring out everything I couldn't say aloud. The anger, the confusion, the hope. It became my secret space, a place where I could be honest with myself. One afternoon, my mom found the journal. Instead of being upset, she hugged me tightly. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. Her words felt like a balm to my broken heart. As the days passed, I learned that secrets don't have to tear us apart. They can be bridges, difficult, fragile, but real. They can teach us about forgiveness, about resilience, about love that isn't perfect but still holds us together. The journey ahead was uncertain. I didn't know where it would lead or how long it would take to heal. But for the first time, I felt ready to face it, not as the perfect daughter, but as myself. Life had changed, and yet, some questions still hung in the air like an unspoken storm. Every day was a struggle between the person I had been taught to be and the person I was desperately trying to understand. The secret my parents revealed wasn't just about biology, it was about everything I thought I knew, unraveling piece by piece. After months of living with the truth about my real father, the initial shock wore off, but the questions only grew louder. Who was this man? Why had he disappeared from my life? And most importantly, why had my parents kept him hidden for so long? It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about the family story, the history I was a part of but hadn't been told. My parents' silence had left gaps filled by assumptions, fears, and painful unknowns. One rainy afternoon, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed answers, no matter how much they hurt. I sat my parents down in the living room, the same room where they had first told me the secret, and looked at them with new determination. "I need to know everything," I said, my voice steady but firm. "No more hiding. No more secrets." My mom exchanged a glance with my dad before she began. "There's so much you don't know," she said, voice trembling. "And some of it is hard to say." But I was ready. I had to be. She told me about a time long before I was born, a time filled with mistakes and regrets. My biological father was someone my parents had met during a difficult chapter of their lives. He wasn't a bad person, but circumstances had torn them apart, choices made out of fear, love lost in the chaos. My mom's eyes filled with tears as she spoke. "We tried to build a life with you to protect you from the pain we had endured." I listened, trying to understand the weight of their words. It was a story filled with heartbreak, but also with love, complicated and imperfect, just like all families. As she finished, my dad took my hand. "We want you to know that no matter what, your daughter. Our love for you has never changed." But even as they spoke, I could see the sadness in their eyes, the sadness of secrets kept too long, and the fear of losing me now. That night, I lay in bed, my mind swirling with the pieces of this new story. My identity felt fractured, but also strangely whole. I realized family wasn't about perfect histories or flawless stories. It was about the messy, painful truth and the love that endures despite it all. The next day, I made a decision. I wanted to meet my biological father. I needed to look him in the eyes, to understand the man behind the secret. With my parents' hesitant blessing, I started searching again, this time armed with more information and more hope. It wasn't easy. I encountered dead ends, silence, and more questions. But finally, after weeks of searching, I found him, or at least, his name and an address. My heart raced as I stood outside a small apartment building. I wasn't sure what to expect: anger, rejection, maybe even kindness. I knocked on the door. A man in his early 40s opened it, surprise flashing across his face. When I told him who I was, his expression shifted from confusion to shock, then something softer, maybe regret. He invited me in. The room was modest, filled with old photographs and memories I wasn't part of. We talked for hours about the past, about mistakes, about what could have been. He told me stories of the life he wanted to share with me, the father he hoped to be. I listened, torn between anger and longing, between resentment and hope. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. Leaving his apartment, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, sadness, and a spark of something new: possibility. I realized that while my parents had tried to protect me with silence, the truth had a way of breaking through, no matter how deep it was buried. And now, I was ready to write the next chapter of my story, one where I defined who I was, not by secrets, but by the choices I made. The days following my meeting with my biological father were like standing in the middle of a raging storm. Whirlwinds of emotions tossed me back and forth, leaving me dizzy and unsure where I truly belonged. I had finally met the man who was a part of me, yet the feeling was more complicated than I had ever imagined. Relief mingled with confusion, anger mixed with hope, and every step forward seemed to pull me deeper into the complicated web my family had woven years ago. Coming back home, I expected some kind of relief, maybe closure. But instead, I found silence thicker than any words could pierce. My parents knew I had reached out, yet their faces held a mixture of relief, sorrow, and fear. That quiet tension between us was almost suffocating. The walls of our house, once familiar and safe, now felt like cages. I walked through each room, hearing echoes of my past life, the life built around being the perfect daughter. But those echoes now sounded hollow. The secret had cracked our foundation, and the home I thought I knew was unrecognizable. School wasn't a refuge anymore. The weight of my family's secret followed me everywhere like a shadow I couldn't outrun. I caught myself withdrawing from friends, afraid to share what I was going through. The idea of being judged or pitied terrified me. And yet, I longed to tell someone, anyone, about the chaos inside my heart. Emma, my closest friend since childhood, was the first to notice the change. One afternoon, sitting beneath the sprawling branches of the old oak tree on campus, she looked at me with concern. "You've been so distant lately. You can tell me anything, you know that, right?" Her words were a lifeline, but the truth felt too heavy to unload. "How do you explain that the people you trusted most kept the biggest secret from you? That your identity was suddenly rewritten, and you were struggling to piece yourself back together?" So, I said nothing. I smiled, nodded, and put on the mask I had worn for years, the mask of perfection. But hiding only made the ache inside grow louder. At home, things were unraveling in quiet ways. I overheard my parents arguing one night, their voices hushed but heavy with pain. "Do you think she'll ever forgive us?" My mother whispered, tears catching in her throat. "She has to," my father said, but his voice was strained. "We did what we thought was best for her." Those words haunted me. They thought they were protecting me. But what did that protection cost? How many years of trust had been sacrificed? The next day, I confronted them, my voice trembling but firm. "I don't know how to trust anymore. How do we fix this when everything feels broken?" My mother reached out and took my hand, her eyes red-rimmed. "We're so sorry for hiding the truth. We want to rebuild what we lost, but it's going to take time and patience." The journey to rebuild trust was long and painful. I realized trust isn't something that can simply be demanded or fixed with apologies. It has to be earned again, step by step. Meanwhile, I noticed a shift in my friendships. Some people drifted away, unable or unwilling to understand the complicated mess my life had become. Rumors and whispers followed me through hallways. The perfect daughter label cracked, replaced by the girl with a family secret. It stung more than I expected. But there was Emma, steadfast and true. She never judged or questioned. She listened when I finally opened up, and when I felt lost, she was the anchor pulling me back. One day, Emma handed me a small, worn notebook. Maybe writing down what you're feeling could help, she said softly. That night, I opened the notebook and let my thoughts pour out. I wrote about the fear, the confusion, the anger. But I also wrote about hope and the possibility of healing. Writing became my secret sanctuary, a place where I could be raw and honest without fear. With every word, I began to reclaim myself, not as the perfect daughter, but as a young woman grappling with truth and choosing to move forward anyway. As weeks turned into months, the tension at home eased. My parents made genuine efforts, more open conversations, shared laughter during family dinners, tears acknowledged instead of hidden. We were slowly piecing our fractured family back together. In a moment that surprised me, I even invited my biological father to join one of our dinners. It was awkward, filled with silence and tentative smiles, but it was also a symbol, an opening of a door that had been locked for so long. One evening, as we sat together, my mother said quietly, "Families aren't perfect. They're messy and complicated, but they're ours. And that's what matters." Her words sank deep into my heart. I realized I didn't need to be perfect anymore. I just needed to be real. Looking around the table, at my parents, my stepfather, and even my biological father, I saw the imperfect love that bound us. It was messy, yes, but it was love. And that was enough. I wasn't just the perfect daughter built on lies. I was me, flawed, broken, but still whole. And for the first time, I felt free. After months of turmoil, confusion, and heartbreak, the day finally came when the dust settled enough for me to see the bigger picture. The secret that had shattered my world wasn't just a devastating revelation. It was the key to understanding the pieces of my life that never quite fit. This truth, painful as it was, forced me to grow beyond the girl I thought I was, the perfect daughter, and step into a new reality filled with complexity, resilience, and hope. The morning light spilled softly through my bedroom window as I sat with the worn notebook Emma had given me. Flipping through the pages, I saw my journey laid bare, every fear, every tear, every small victory. Writing had become my therapy, my way to make sense of the chaos inside. But I knew it was time for a new chapter, one where I no longer hid from the truth but embraced it fully. At school, whispers still lingered, but I faced them differently now. I didn't need to pretend anymore. My friends who mattered stood by me, and those who didn't. Well, I was learning that not everyone deserved a place in my story. One afternoon, after class, Emma and I sat beneath our oak tree, the one that had witnessed so many of our conversations. "You're stronger than you know," she said, her voice warm. "You've survived so much and still found a way to keep going. That's real courage." Her words touched something deep inside me. Courage wasn't about being perfect. It was about facing your darkest moments and refusing to be defined by them. Back home, the atmosphere had transformed in subtle but meaningful ways. My parents no longer avoided difficult conversations. Instead, we talked openly, even about things that hurt. My mom shared stories from her past, about her fears, her mistakes, and the heavy burden of keeping secrets. Hearing her vulnerability made me realize that adults aren't infallible. They're just as human and flawed as anyone else. One evening, as we sat around the dinner table, my father reached out and took my hand. "I'm proud of you," he said quietly. "Not because you're perfect, but because you've found your own strength. That's what matters." Those words stayed with me long after the meal ended. For years, I had chased an impossible ideal, perfection, only to discover that true strength comes from authenticity and acceptance. The most surprising moment came when I invited my biological father to spend more time with us. The bond we began to build wasn't easy or instant, but it was real. We shared stories, laughter, and sometimes tears. Through him, I learned more about where I came from and how that history shaped me. As the months passed, I found new passions and dreams. I joined a writing club at school, inspired by my journal, and discovered a voice I never knew I had. Sharing my story, in pieces, gave me a sense of purpose and connection. Yet, the biggest lesson I learned was about forgiveness, forgiving my parents, my biological father, and most importantly, myself. I wasn't perfect, and neither was my family. But love, even when messy and painful, could heal wounds I once thought permanent. One chilly autumn afternoon, standing beneath the golden leaves of our old oak tree, I closed my notebook and looked up at the sky. The world was still complicated, still uncertain, but I felt ready. I wasn't just the perfect daughter anymore. I was a young woman who had faced her darkest fears, uncovered hard truths, and chosen to rise. And that made all the difference.